won the World Cup today? I know. Did France win?
France won. We are live, so congratulations to France on winning the World Cup. We were both wrong on that one. I mean, I guess,
Yes, I'll apologize right up front. I made two predictions. They played for third and fourth place. So it just shows you how much I know about soccer. But, I didn't even watch today. I just don't think I missed anything. I'm sorry. I know that offends a lot of people, but I just don't care.
I watched I watched the highlights. It seemed like, everybody agreed France was one of the most talented teams in the tournament, and they won 4-2. And then, when you're playing a team that seems like they're the better team, you can't make mistakes. And the Croatians basically they scored on their own net. I mean, the other guy took credit for it, but it was like a corner kick, and they all went up to head it, and the Croatian guy hit it with his head and got it past his own goalie. So, when you make mistakes against the superior team, you're pretty much going to lose. Especially in soccer when I know they scored 6. There was 6 goals in this game, which is a lot for a soccer match. But, when you're playing soccer, like every goal really, you can't afford to give up a goal, let alone your own, on your own self. So.
Yeah.
But, congratulations to France and all the soccer people. Hopefully they had fun and enjoyed it all.
Yeah. So I'll start us off with my sport business moment.
All right.
So I was at the AAA All-Star game this week, and I had a chance to talk to one of my former students, Jim Smith, who was the senior SVP of marketing and sales for the Atlanta Falcons when they built the new stadium. And he was the one who came up with the concept of the low-price concessions.
Okay.
And so as I talked to him, we were talking about a number of different things. And then I've noticed now this week Mississippi State has come rolling out lower price concessions, and I think you're going to see a lot of people do it this year. And so I asked Jim, I said, how did you get it done? And he said, the only way you get something like that done is you don't ask the concessions company to be a sponsor. Because once you ask them to be a sponsor, what their priority is to get their money back. And they get their money back by either raising concession prices or making a few more hot dogs per pound or making soft drink a little less, less of a cup. But you cut back on quantity or you increase prices, get your money back, and that continues to cause that problem where you can't do it. So what I'm advocating now is that everybody don't have a sponsorship arrangement with your concessionaire. Have a partnership where it's in both of your best interests to sell a lot of concessions. And it's a volume play. And if you sell enough food, you're going to make money. So be partners and do it that way. So that's my soapbox on it.
It makes sense.
I know. Unfortunately, sometimes a lot of this stuff makes sense. Sometimes your mind is boggled because it makes so much sense, and you don't do it. It just doesn't make sense.
Well,
how you could ignore it.
Yeah, it's been a few years since I've been to a Magic game, but the Magic had pretty terrible food there. I think they're only when I went, they had Papa John's, and obviously, that was before all the terrible stuff that just came out about him, but it was Papa John's and hot dogs and cafeteria flavored hamburger, all that sort of stuff. And it was all
it's our business moment. There might not be too many Papa John's deals this week.
No. And again, at the Magic Stadium, it was if it was cheap, I probably would go and, eat a hot dog and just go with that. But I'm like, if I'm paying good quality restaurant prices for mediocre food, I'm going to get food before, I'm going to get food after. I'm not going to eat it there. But if it was cheap, then I'd probably say, whatever, I'll just eat hot dogs at the game. As long as I'm getting something the volume, like you said. I'd buy more if it was cheaper, obviously.
Well, I think we're going to see a lot more people dropping their Papa John's deals this week if they can get out of them.
What about poor Peyton Manning? What's he going to do?
He already sold them all.
He already sold them all?
He sold them a couple months ago.
Oh.
I saw that today. Whatever he does, Jason, is always, no matter what he does, he always comes out smelling like a rose.
I was about to say, 'cause he had 70-something stores, I thought.
Well, he sold all the ones he had in Denver.
Oh, wow.
I think it was 28 or 30 stores. He sold them all.
I wonder if he...
And now, they took the name off the stadium in Louisville. So I guess they want to see... I guess people will be investigating if they have to give some money back to Papa John if they took the money, because it was like a 20-plus year naming rights deal.
Yeah, I guess there's some kind of moral clause or something along those lines that might save people. Because I know Jerry Jones and the Cowboys were pretty in bed with Papa and Papa John's. Yeah. As we've talked about on the show before, it's incredibly overpriced, insanely mediocre pizza. So it was kind of amazing that it ever got to be big at all.
Yeah, but he took off. He had a creative way of putting it out there, and he had those deals. You know, he tied them all into. He used sports to really leverage that brand.
Yeah.
And build it up through sports. So that's what he did.
As like I said, more power to him. Somehow how he did it.
And my last thing I want to talk about in my trip to Columbus is I saw the world's largest Ronald McDonald House.
Oh.
Is in Columbus. And what is impressive with me is, like a sports team will have a charity and they'll support the charity. But usually they're the only ones to support that particular charity, right?
Typically, yes.
In this one, every team in the market supports Ronald McDonald House.
That's really good.
It's just amazing. I mean, the Blue Jackets have a game room with, air hockey and a bunch of other things, TVs to watch the games. And then they have a hallway that they made into a hockey rink, a mini hockey rink.
Oh.
So kids can play in the hallway. And then the NHL came in and took a stairway and made it into a treehouse.
That's
and
very
then
cool.
Ohio State has a room, or Ohio State football, Ohio State basketball, the Columbus Crew. They all have things. It's just amazing to see this many sports organizations all on the same page in the same market. So I'm going to be writing my SBJ column about that in August. And there'll be some great pictures. But I was really, really impressed.
It'd be nice if more. I know, part of the charity is your brand, and you want to make sure that everybody knows that you're the one. But it's so much more effective if everybody can come together and make joint effort as opposed to everyone trying to, Cause then
I think it's a real message that how important this is to the community.
Yeah.
So I was pretty impressed with it.
Exactly.
And the other, we should probably, say our prayers till 4 o'clock tomorrow that Le'Veon Bell gets the deal done.
I'm a little on the fence as a Steeler fan. I'm going to be honest with you. I kind of want to see him play under the franchise tag one more year. He had 412 touches his last season at Michigan State. He's averaged over almost 400 touches a year in the NFL. He's going to be 27 this year. His numbers have been down in the last 2 seasons overall. Now, I know there's a number of factors that go into that, and it's hard to, who you're playing against, what they're out to do, and everything else. But, unless it's one of those contracts where it's a lot of upload money in the first 2 years and they can dump them in 2 years, I don't want to see them make a long-term commitment to Le'Veon Bell. I know that's sort of the harsh bit, but that's the reality of the NFL. As a running back, how many years does he really have left of being, a great producer of, yards? And they need him. He's obviously essential to that team, and I don't want to take anything away from that. But if they can give him the deal, if he takes something like the deal he took, or the deal they offered him last year, which was 4 years at 60, which is his $15 million a year, $30 million guaranteed over the first 2 years, and then obviously he wants more guaranteed long term. But clearly, with the cap going up almost $10 million a year, and if he produces the way he's produced, he's going to make that money anyway, or he's going to be free to renegotiate at 29. But I just think it's the reality of the financial situation in the NFL. It's tough to make that kind of commitment to somebody with that many yards on him as a running back.
I know. I'll be waiting. I'll be watching it.
But at the same time, obviously you're a big Mason Rudolph fan. Not to go too Steeler with us here for a second, but this is a Steeler minute. Steeler 2 minutes. With Ben on the edge, Antonio Brown being 30, Ben being a year or two away probably from being done no matter what he ends up saying. This is your window, so maybe just load up and then fall apart for a couple years. So either way, it's fine.
Okay. That's what happens. Well, you wanted to introduce a new theme in the show today.
I did. It's a little bit of a slow sports week. Obviously, no offense to World Cup fans. I know it was a big deal today. But we sort of acknowledged more soccer in the last 2 weeks than we do in a typical year. So we feel like we've covered that to as much expertise as we can. So we're going to have a bit of a discussion about the Kennedy family. And this is sort of spurred on by the release of Chappaquiddick. I watched it on iTunes the other day. And I was just thinking about the Kennedy family in general, which is just a fascinating family with all the stuff that family that happened to that family in particular, and then all the mystery and all the who the conspiracy theories around it, and then looking at them sort of through the prism of, if we think about what the Kennedys were in the '60s, they were almost like our royal family, where the Kennedys could do no wrong. We love the Kennedys, and what that would look like today. But I specifically wanted to talk a little bit about the story of Chappaquiddick because I don't know, and I know you're a big Kennedy person.
And, in this day and age, if this would happen, if what happened then happened now, social media and public opinion would have got so much information out there that it would have been the end of his political career right after that. He would have never gone back to the Senate and never been a candidate again. He would have been done 2 weeks after this whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
No way, with TMZ and everything else, all these investigative reports, all these different media outlets. You gotta remember, when he did that, there wasn't even cable TV.
No.
I mean, so this was the networks. And so you had limited coverage, and you could position it the way you need to position it. And with the money they had, they could position. I'm a big fan of the Kennedys, but that was a huge mistake on Ted's part. And he handled it very, very poorly, very, very immaturely. And he would be roasted for it in 2018. He never got away with it.
And just to give a quick summary, because, I mean, this isn't really spoilery because Chappaquiddick happened and you could read about it online, and it happened, 40 years, 50 years ago, whatever it was. So it's not really spoiling the movie. It's a historical event. But essentially, no one knew. He was in it was Martha's Vineyard, right? The little island?
Martha's Vineyard.
He was on Martha's Vineyard. It's my Kennedy accent for you. And he was having a party with a couple of male friends and what were called the Boiler Room Girls. And these were women that had worked for both John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy, so they were very committed to the Kennedy brand, if you will, politically speaking. At some point in the night, Ted and he took one of the Boiler Room Girls and they went for a drive. Now, according to him, there was no sex. There was nothing about sex involved. They were just simply going to take a drive. On the island itself, there's two roads. One road is a narrow road that leads to where the accident happened. The other road leads to the ferry. What's important to know about this is that the last ferry left at 11 o'clock at night, and this was at 12:30 at night. So part of his story about driving to the ferry makes a little bit less sense considering there was no ferry running.
It was gone.
It was gone. Now, I know you're drinking a lot. Maybe he wasn't thinking. Maybe that's not his style. But, I mean, as somebody that spent a lot of time up there, it's logical to assume he might have known that there'd be no ferry going. So at the very least, he's seen by a cop going fast down the wrong road. Now, to his credit, the road itself, because they go into this in pretty great detail, both in real life and in the movie, it's a very narrow dirt road. And then the bridge kind of comes at an odd angle, and there's no railing on either side of the bridge. So his car flips over in the water, lands upside down. He gets out of the car. She doesn't. Now, this is where all the mystery takes place, because the next time he is seen is off the island having breakfast with friends next to his hotel. And she's been in the car the entire time, dead. But they also said in the autopsy that she was probably alive for a little bit while after the car went in the water. Like, that she didn't drown initially. It took a while for the car to completely fill up with water. Now, he's had a number of stories. One is that he had a concussion, didn't know what he was doing, and swam all the way across from Martha's Vineyard to the mainland. Another story is that once the car went in the water...
It's like 37 miles.
Yeah. Another story is that he continually dove down for it, but was simply unable to get her out of the car. And he was so dazed and exhausted and concussed that he wasn't able to tell his friends what happened. They took him back across the bay to the hotel where he woke up the next day, had breakfast, and finally realized what happened. So it's a little, like I said, it's pretty difficult to, it's like, it seems like there's some obvious lying on his part on some level.
It's unfathomable.
Because he also got in trouble where, he said he was on medication, and they were like, well, so they would never give anyone that medication that had a concussion. And then he sort of walked that back. I've learned this. The neck brace he wore the next day?
Mm-hmm.
He sort of invented the sympathetic, he's given credit for almost inventing the sympathetic neck brace. Where you just put the neck brace on over your suit to look like you've had some sort of traumatic event.
Mm-hmm.
Now, her family, her mother and father, continue to support the Kennedys. So, they obviously didn't blame him. And it seemed like, because the video I went on a deep internet dive. And they had actual footage of people, they were talking to people about him. And it seemed like a lot of the country, now granted this is probably a pro-Kennedy person out on the camera, but they all said that, they weren't exactly sure what happened, but that Ted Kennedy was a great man and that they weren't going to hold this against him. And then some people brought up the fact, and I think this may have played a big deal too, is that when you look at what happened to John F. Kennedy, then you look at what happened to Robert Kennedy, that there was just sort of not given a pass for whatever happened in that car, but that they had a lot of sympathy built up for the Kennedys based on what happened to his two brothers. And that maybe people
I subscribe to that. I totally subscribe to that. That's great. So I was living in the time, I believe that's exactly what happened. And I was like, well, Kennedy spent a lot of money creating some publicity and doing some things as well.
Definitely. And again, there was a lot of, the movie sort of paints it that, and again, I looked some of this up as real. He did come in the next day to the sheriff's office once they pulled the car up and they sort of figured out who it was. He wrote a statement. And the statement was read, but once he got with his father and his father's people, they sort of contradicted his own statement. And they tried to squash the statement so the statement didn't come out. But that's again when they said that, he had a concussion, and that sort of explained his erratic behavior and his leaving the scene and his not knowing what was going on and all those sorts of situations. Now, I sort of subscribe to the theory basically that in the movie, granted, I guess I'm a little bit skewed by what I watched on the screen, but he seemed like someone that, always felt he was in the shadow, obviously, of his two brothers. That he was never quite, at least in his father's eyes, never able to measure up to that. And that, he really wanted to be, make his father proud and, become a successful politician, all these sorts of things. And to be fair, he did go on, although he didn't get the electoral votes in 76 for the Democratic nomination, he was a successful senator up till early 2000s, right?
At least the late 90s.
At least late 90s,
sure.
Right? So this didn't entirely, they said it killed his political.
I'm not sure when he wound down, but I think it was in the 90s, but it's hard to say. It could have been over past 2000. I think about it.
Now, again, I'm not going to speculate what, I don't want to disparage a young woman's reputation, whether there was any sex or what was going on in the car, but it seems like the accident happened. My theory is the accident happened. He panicked. And, maybe he, and I assume that he didn't seem like the kind of person that if he thought she was still alive in the car, he would have left her there. I think he assumed that, they crashed. He was able to get out. He never saw her pop up. He didn't go back looking for her, despite what he said. And then I think he just panicked. He saw everything in his life crumbling over this seemingly one mistake, and he thought if he could just get away from this mistake and not get blamed for this, then he could continue to have a life and make his dad proud. So there was no malice on his part.
I think that's a plausible theory.
That, he was in a, because I think a lot of people, it's easy to say, what they would have done in that situation, but I think, I'm sure everybody's panicked when they've hit somebody in the parking lot, and we've seen many times, I've recently been the victim of somebody not leaving a note. And somebody scraped the side of my car down here in Louisiana, which is pretty common. But, I think a lot of people would always, if you ask people, they're like, of course you leave a note, of course you leave a note. And then I think some people just panic. And obviously somebody in the car and scraping somebody's car is a big difference. But I think there's that little minute, that moment of like, oh my God, and just run away. And I think that's what happened to him. And the movie implies that he was about to do the right thing in the press conference, that his friends had talked him into, just come out, be completely honest with the American public, they love you, they love this family, they'll do everything they can to believe you. But his father's sort of political crew wrote a different press conference speech, and that's the one he went with. He ignored the truth and went with a massaged, much more flattering version of the truth. One where he heroically dove down many times in an attempt to get her out of the car and was simply unable to. And that the concussion was the cause of his erratic behavior, and he would do everything he could to continue to serve the American people for the next, 20, 30 years, as long as he was about to be bound. So, and I think we can assume that it probably did cost him the presidency, right?
We can assume it cost him a realistic shot to get the nomination and to begin the election. I agree with that.
Because it seemed like, based on his trajectory, when you read everything about him, that he would have been the Democratic choice above Jimmy Carter in '76. That another Kennedy running...
I'm sure that's true. If this wouldn't happen.
But when this happened, it sort of pushed him away from that potential, to be that. And obviously, like I said, this is another conspiracy. Not as great as, obviously, the John F. Kennedy conspiracy or even the Robert Kennedy conspiracy. But that's a family that, every tragedy is sort of just blanketed in all these theories as to what actually happened. And we don't really have a big clue as to what did happen,
And we'll never know.
And we'll never know.
Just like with the other two conspiracies.
Right. But it's all fascinating. But then I was also thinking, sort of tying it back to our point about, how you said, today, social media, he would have been just destroyed, And obviously,
totally destroyed.
Somebody like, the
Kennedys... Too many media outlets, too many investigative reporters, too many news shows, too many people trying to make a name for themselves to find things out. There's no shot. They would have found everything. They would have been probing everything about earlier that evening, about other times that he'd been with other women. They would have been nasty.
Right. But I was thinking, I think the only close to modern example we have, I guess we technically have two examples of families that seem to be in the spotlight that are able to continue to live and succeed. Like in Britain, we obviously have the royal family. And they've had a number of little, dust-ups and conspiracies and scandals over the years. But they're sort of still held in this incredibly high esteem worldwide. Like you look at the Meghan Markle, the proposal, marriage, all that sort of stuff, right? Even people in this country go crazy. No matter what comes out about the royal family, they seem to have a little bit of that Kennedy to them, where they're just held at such a high, even no matter, people just ignore all the, the little scandal here, all the little things that have popped up over the years, right? And then the only family we have over here that seems to just have sort of a weird Teflon continue to just rise, and this is a very sad statement, I think it's the Kardashians. But, they're obviously not looked anywhere near the same as the royal family. They're obviously, despised by as many people as they are loved, I think. But it got me thinking, is it possible to even have an American version of the actual Kennedys again, where we have some family that we just hold to this?
Well, the Bush family, definitely the Bush family.
It's true. Were they held? I know they obviously had a lot of political success.
For a lot of people, they are American royalty.
Oh. I never really looked at them.
And there was talk that Jeb would have been a presidential. Jeb tried to run for the presidency too. That had been 3. But yeah, the cross between the royal family and the Kennedys would definitely be the Bush family.
But you look at obviously now with Chelsea, right, and the Clintons. Just given her age and her record now, you got to assume Hillary's probably not going to get to be president. But obviously Bill ran quite a bit. But even now, you look at them and they get destroyed. They're
because there's just
right.
Haters and there's lovers people. You either love them or you hate them.
But like I said, the royal family seem to be like the Kennedys, where they seem to have this Teflon feel, where they're just the royals, and we just like them for whatever reason, whether or not we know them or know what they do. People are always like, well, they do all this charity work and all this sort of stuff, but nobody really knows all the stuff that they do or don't do. But the Kennedys literally seem to have that when you go back and read stuff and you look at the way they reacted to them, is that they were just, obviously there were probably, Republicans that didn't like John F. Kennedy and all that sort of stuff, but And maybe the FBI and the CIA and the mob, depending on, your...
So would you recommend the film?
I would say, as somebody that knew almost nothing about Chappaquiddick, undoubtedly yes. Bizarrely, there's two performances in there that kind of caught me off guard because they actually turned out to be really well. And that's that two of his friends, his close confidants in the film, are played by Jim Gaffigan and Ed Helms. And this is more based on me, as more as opposed to them as actors, is that, I just view them both as sort of silly, goofy people. But I thought they both just handled the roles perfectly. I thought Ed Helms was really, really good. He showed a lot of range and like I said, I'm used to the guy from The Office, so. But I thought he did a really good job, and it wasn't distracting, But like I said, I knew nothing about. I knew the story that Ted Kennedy. I mean, the way it had been presented to me, basically through the filters that I've received throughout my life, was basically Ted Kennedy murdered a woman in the water and got away with it. So this gave me, the movie caused me to have a different perspective, and then obviously do a deep dive on Chappaquiddick and watch some videos and read some news stories of the time and sort of get a different view as to what actually, we still don't know exactly, we'll never know what happened, obviously. But just have a different perspective as opposed to, he murdered a woman in the water and got away with it.
Well, I've got some entertainment. I want to talk about Code 100.
Okay.
Which is a limited series on WGN America. I think it's 12 episodes, and I've been through the first 4, and it's really gotten my attention. I'm really interested in it. So to me, it's a cross between The Following and Silence of the Lambs. So it's a really interesting take on that. And then tonight I'm planning on watching For the Defense on Oxygen Network, which is going to be a interview and some storyline with the attorney for Ted Bundy, who's one of the most notorious serial killers of all time. And in the pre-event publicity that's come out surrounding the episode, they've they published a couple excerpts of the transcript with the lawyer. And like I told you offline, he said that Ted Bundy was the only person he's ever met that was pure evil. So I'm definitely going to watch that tonight on WGN, or I'm sorry, on Oxygen tonight. It's probably the only time I ever watch Oxygen.
I would assume so, yeah.
Food moment, disappointment in Columbus. I didn't have much great food in Columbus. I had a great breakfast at TJ's Country Place. I had the Barnyard Buster, which you and I used to eat regularly when we lived in Columbus. And I had Graters, which I always loved, but I had Jenny's ice cream, which is even more premium than Graters. They can sell it for $10 a pint. And I had a cone of the milkiest chocolate. And it was off the hook. It was really, really amazing.
Well, that is outstanding. I did not keep up my promise of trying somewhere new this weekend, so I've let everybody down. I have no new food moment, just places I've already been to in the past. But I'm going to try to hopefully correct that this week. I did have one more.
I have a new author I'm investigating named Lori Roy.
Okay.
And I think she's a Floridian. She's written 4 novels. One just came out. The first 3, one was a Mystery Writers Award winner. One was an Edgar winner for your first novel, and one was an Edgar winner for just a novel period. So that's a pretty good ratio. You write 4 books, and one's just coming out, and the other 3 were award winners.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So I'm going to check her out and see what I think about that.
And in other movie news, I did finally watch Ready Player One, which is Spielberg's adaptation of the film. The book itself has issues. It's a very sort of, it's a lot of just references to things that happen between, 80s music and 80s horror movies and sci-fi, and then a lot of video game stuff. And the movie is just full of reference. It never quite gets to where you expect it to go. And then the knock on the book is that, it never really takes a stand on whether or not, because basically it's about, people are, everybody's poor, living in stacks and trailers for the most part, except the very, very rich. So you've got a little bit of the economic thing. And the way that they escape is they go to the Oasis. And the Oasis is this virtual world where you can be anybody, do anything, create anything. And basically everybody, dresses like 80s characters and sci-fi characters and video game characters and runs around and has a good time. But they never really get into the whole, they teeter on the idea that, you need to be living in the real world and not in the fake world, as I think the overall arc of the story. But they basically come down and they say that you should take a couple days off a week from it. So. But
all right, so what would be your Rotten Tomatoes score for it?
I think as a one-time viewing, maybe like a 60, 62.
Okay.
I think if you're somebody like me that's watched a lot of like anime and played a lot of video games, it's kind of neat from time to time. Like, the Iron Giant. I mean, these are things from the trailer. Like the Iron Giant pops into the thing, and Mecha Godzilla, and you have the car from Back to the Future, and Batman, and Ninja Turtles, and characters from Overwatch and Halo. Like, you get to see them all on the screen at different points. So I think the first time you watch it, you get to sort of just nerd out watching all these, beloved anime, video game, pop culture characters explode on the screen is kind of fun. But ultimately, it's a little bit of a shallow experience, I would say. But as a one-time viewing, I think it's worth it.
Is it an homage to the 80s?
I mean, musically, certainly. Like, it opens up with Van Halen's Jump, and he's driving, the Back to the Future car. So it's got a lot of, the 80s. But like I said, it also has Overwatch character and, and a lot of it is like watching a video game in real life. So, and like I said, I think the first time watching it once is kind of fun because there's a lot of, there is one sequence that I'll shout out. I won't spoil it, but I think you would even enjoy this. Basically, the character has to, the guy that invented the Oasis, the premise of the plot of the movie is that once he dies, he's created these challenges. And you have to find his favorite things to get keys, and whoever finds all the keys gets to take control of the Oasis. And obviously the corporation wants to, they talk about how they can cover 80% of people's screens with ads before they cause seizures. And obviously the regular people just want to keep it wide open. But his favorite movie was The Shining. So they go to The Shining and they have a whole virtual reality Shining experience. It looks really cool.
I might go watch it just for that.
Yeah, just that part alone is worth watching because it's pretty. I mean, between the little girls and some other stuff, it's pretty cool.
All right, I'll have to check it out. Any NBA comments this week? Been quite a week on the NBA front too.
I'm still shocked that anybody, let alone Houston, wants Carmelo Anthony. I know nobody obviously wants to trade Oklahoma City and help them out cap-wise, but the fact that he's a desired free agent after what we've seen the last probably 3 seasons. And his attitude, I find it shocking that people are excited that he's going to be available. So, I guess that would be my NBA news. Because I've heard, like, Miami, obviously Houston. And you look at Houston, and I know they like a lot of isolation on offense, and he can probably still do that, but it just seems like such a weird fit,
That seems just as weird as Oklahoma City with Paul George, Russell Westbrook, and Carmelo.
Yeah, I know, but I think you thought maybe if Carmelo got out of a losing situation and he ended up in Oklahoma City on at least last year, when healthy, they beat the...
I remember your exact words. Your exact words were Olympic Carmelo.
Right, and you thought, maybe, he pulls it together. And the most interesting place I thought for him, just because, I'd like to see what would happen. I'm not sure if people are aware of this, but if you play for the Miami Heat, they have a body fat clause. So... they serve their players only healthy food. They have them on extreme regimens. Like, even when Dwayne Wayne went back there, he had to trim down. He was too fat to play for the Heat. And Melo has obviously never been, I would say, obviously...
he's always said, baby fat would be kind.
Baby fat would be kind. It's always weird to say that about a professional athlete who was a far greater athlete than I've ever imagined being. But, it would be interesting to see if he went to Miami, he got into their program, and they had him trim down, 25, 30 pounds of fat. And we saw like a rejuvenated Melo. Just to see if that could happen. But when you look at a guy that's, half of his Instagram is him drinking wine and eating food, it's hard to imagine that would be a place he's looking to go right now in his career.
I would agree. But I think he's looking at, I think right now he wants to be wanted, so we'll see where he ends up.
Yeah. And I think I didn't lose respect for him, but it seemed like 3 or 4 years ago, the last time he was Olympic Melo when they won the gold medal, and he made comments like this Olympic medal is better than any NBA championship ever. It sort of seemed like he had, I'm not trying to put the best way to put this, like he had not given up by any stretch, but he was satisfied at that point in life, which seems really silly because no offense to an Olympic medal in basketball, but, you know.
But that's almost a given.
It's almost a given if you're America. Like, I know we haven't technically, I know we've been beaten before, but we didn't send our very best most of the, anytime we send the best American basketball players, we're pretty much unbeatable. So, you know, the fact that he seemed like he had almost given up on an NBA championship, I don't know. And it's kind of
the preview for next week.
Also, as an Oklahoma City fan, I don't want to see him go to Houston and all of a sudden be comfortable coming off the bench and play the role that he was supposed to play in Oklahoma City and do well. So there's the selfish part of me that doesn't want to see him succeed in that role. But that's it.
I'm probably with you on that. Anything we need to tee up for our audience for next week?
I guess we'll try
Talk a little
to.
bit about the home run derby and the All-Star game. I guess we can talk about those things next week and see how those turn out.
Yeah.
I'm not anticipating a great home run derby show.
No. I think we might have another alternative sort of show next week. We might have to come up with some other topics to fill it out because I'm not sure how much sports we're going to have that everyone's going to be interested in listening to. But you never know. I mean, World Cup is over.
You never know.
NBA free agency is kind of. We've seen all the important players go where they're going to go.
I will be watching the Open next week because I do love watching them play in Scotland and Ireland and England. So I'll talk a little golf next week.
Sounds good. And you never know. Maybe we get some NFL, some interesting NBA news. We still have Kawhi hanging out in the wind.
And we'll be able to talk about Le'Veon Bell.
Yes. And I guess keep an eye on this because randomly out of nowhere, Las Vegas has made Toronto almost the favorite to land Kawhi Leonard.
Interesting.
Yeah. And just to basically their point is that, you know, if San Antonio would love a guy like a Kobe, because he's sort of a Kawhi light at this point as a second-year player. And then if you're Toronto, you break up the Rosen Lowry backcourt, you get off Rosen's money, and you take 1 year and just ride with it, and if not, you bottom out.
Yeah, interesting take.
Yeah. But you never know. So until next week, I'm Jason, and obviously here.
I'm Bill, and thanks for listening, and we appreciate your